Welcome to the Podkey summary of Dartmouth College fraternities and sororities. Dartmouth's Greek system is unusual partly because it's still so central to campus life, and partly because it carries a very long, very complicated history. It's a story about student power, housing, exclusion and resistance, institutional survival, and a campus that keeps trying to reform this system without ever quite leaving it behind. Right now, Greek life at Dartmouth is still big, still influential, and still contested. To understand why, it helps to look at how these organizations became such a defining part of the place in the first place. Greek life remains unusually central to Dartmouth's undergraduate experience. In fall 2022, 35% of male students belong to fraternities, and 36% of students belong to sororities. As of 2025, the college recognized 15 male fraternities, 11 female sororities, and 3 gender-inclusive houses. That's a lot of organizational infrastructure for one campus, and it helps explain why Greek life is still one of the main ways students organize social life. These houses are a little different from what people sometimes picture. They're social and residential spaces, and they're also Dartmouth's only single-sex residential option. But they're not meal communities in the usual sense, because fraternity dining was banned way back in 1909. So the system sits in this interesting middle ground. It's not just a set of party spaces, and it's not exactly like a dorm system either. It's a network of houses with social power, residential meaning, and a long memory. It's also fragmented by design. Governance runs through several councils, including the Interfraternity Council, Inter-Sorority Council, Gender-Inclusive Greek Council, National Pan-Hellenic Council, and Multicultural Greek Council, which reflects how gender and cultural identity have shaped the system over time. The roots go back before fraternities as we know them. In the late 18th century, Dartmouth students built literary societies that handled a lot of the intellectual and social life on campus. Then, the college changed. As the library expanded and the curriculum broadened in the 1830s and 1840s, those societies started to fade, and selective Greek letter organizations moved into that space. By 1855, Greek membership had already reached 64% of students, which is a striking number. These groups also evolved physically, from meeting rooms and society libraries into dedicated residential and meeting halls. The 1920s boom gave Dartmouth the version of Greek life people still recognize today, especially the cluster of houses on Webster Avenue known as Fraternity Row. You can almost see the optimism and the money in that build-out. But the history never moves in a straight line. The houses expanded in the 1920s, then got hit hard during the Great Depression, and during World War II, all surviving fraternities closed, while Dartmouth was used for the Navy's V-12 training program. That boom and bust pattern matters because it shows Greek life was never some perfectly stable tradition. It has repeatedly had to reinvent itself, financially and culturally, just to keep going. One of the more important and honestly more surprising chapters here is civil rights. In 1954, a campus referendum required fraternities to get rid of discriminatory membership rules by 1960, or break from national organizations that kept them. Several Dartmouth chapters actually did it. Phi Sigma Kappa broke in 1956, and Delta Tau Delta, Phi Delta Theta, and Sigma Chi followed in 1960. Sigma Nu did the same in 1963. There's a real irony in that history. Dartmouth locals gave up their national affiliations on principle, and then, in many cases, the national organizations changed their policies soon afterward anyway. So the local chapters paid a cost, but they forced the issue. That matters because it complicates the usual story people tell about fraternities as always lagging social change. At Dartmouth, some chapters pushed ahead of their own nationals. The first historically black fraternity at Dartmouth, Alpha Phi Alpha, was chartered in 1972. Later, culturally focused organizations developed through separate councils rather than being folded into the main interfraternity or intersorority structure. When women entered Dartmouth as full-time students in 1972, the old Greek structure was immediately under pressure. Within a year, 5 local fraternities had adopted coeducational membership. Then the first sorority, Sigma Kappa, arrived in 1977. That might sound like the beginning of a straightforward balancing act, but it really wasn't. The college put a moratorium in place that limited campus to 6 recognized sororities, because alumni worried sorority housing would create financial pressure and weaken existing fraternities. So even expansion came with brakes attached. Administrators repeatedly debated whether the system would eventually become all coeducational. Students kept resisting that outcome. In a 1999 campus survey, 83% of respondents supported keeping single-sex organizations. At the same time, gender-inclusive houses became a durable alternative. Phi Tau is a notable example because it formally excluded gender from its constitution in 1956 and has continuously included female members since admitting them. And this isn't just old history. In 2024, Epsilon Kappa Theta left the Inter-Sorority Council over concerns about accommodating marginalized genders and joined the Gender-Inclusive Greek Council instead. That move says a lot about where the tension sits now. The system hasn't settled the question of gender so much as learned to live with competing models under the same broad umbrella. The other constant in this story is risk. Dartmouth's Greek system has been repeatedly challenged by safety failures, misconduct, and financial instability. Some of the history is grim. In 1934, 9 Theta Chi members died from carbon monoxide poisoning after a defective chimney in a deteriorating house. In 1920, a murder at Theta Delta Chi was tied to bootlegging during Prohibition, which is one of those details that sounds almost fictional until you remember how old and messy this system is. The college has kept trying to impose more oversight. Faculty voted 67 to 16 in 1967 to abolish fraternities altogether, but the Board of Trustees said no. Later came annual minimum standards reviews in 1982. And in 1993, the college created coeducational undergraduate societies as alternatives to the mostly single-sex Greek system. Even now, recognition is conditional. In July 2024, Dartmouth suspended Beta Alpha Omega and Alpha Phi after student Wan Zhang died following a social gathering involving the 2 organizations. And Sigma Alpha Epsilon has continued operating independently since being derecognized in 2016, which is its own reminder that formal college recognition and actual student social life are not always the same thing. That's really the through line here. Dartmouth keeps trying to regulate, redirect, or partially replace Greek life, but the system remains deeply embedded because it does several jobs at once: housing, identity, status, social life, and tradition. So, if Dartmouth's Greek life seems hard to summarize neatly, that's because it really is. It's central, fractured, reformable, resistant to reform, and still powerful enough that every debate about student life seems to circle back to it. And for a system that hasn't served regular meals since 1909, it still gives the campus a lot to chew on. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.